Welcome to A Parent's Guide to Child Development. I'm your host, Anna-Marie Von Furley from Fledglings Flight. Each podcast, we strive to give parents the tools they need to help their child thrive through conversations with experts in child development and psychology, where you can learn about the most important information that you didn't know existed. Hi, welcome to A Parent's Guide to Child Development. I'm Anna-Marie Von Furley with Fledglings Flight, and today we are talking toilet time with Tabby. Tabitha Poole is an occupational therapist with more than 13 years experience working in pediatrics. She offers advice and support in all things continence via home visits and video consultations to clients worldwide through her business, Toilet Time with Tabby. Believing that there's always more to learn about continence management, Tabby's enthusiastic about continuing her own education to ensure her practice are in line with the best and most up-to-date evidence in the field. When she's not talking about poo and wee, Tabby spends her time with her husband, Phil, her little dog, Tutu, flying small planes, dancing, traveling, and spending time outdoors. Well, that's a lot.
Absolutely. I'm an occupational therapist, so I got to be doing stuff, you know?
Oh my goodness, flying planes. What?
Yeah, my husband's a pilot. He's a career pilot, but I also got my pilot's license back in 2020. I thought that was a good COVID activity. So I learned to fly little planes. So now that's something we do as a family, which is just so fun.
Oh, that's amazing. Man, I know very few people who are pilots, and you are one of them. So that's super exciting.
I'm a baby pilot.
So, what made you decide to specialize in potty training with children since poos and pees are not particularly glamorous?
Yeah, it's not really the most glamorous field. However, it is so important. If we think about it, everybody poops, everybody pees. And if these things are out of whack in your life, if they're not going the way that they should be, it doesn't just impact the child, it impacts the whole family and everyone around that child. And I was really lucky. I worked for a wonderful organization back in Australia, and they had a specialist multidisciplinary continence team, and I would refer children that I was working with to them for potty training advice and support. And these children would come back to me, not only potty trained, but also just happier, healthier, communicating better. Their regulation was better, their families were happier. And I thought, what is this witchcraft? So I decided to do a secondment with that team and learn hopefully everything that they knew. And it really spiraled from there. I thought I'd spend a year there, and I ended up spending the last 8 years just working in the field of continence.
Oh my gosh. So what does your typical day look like?
It's a little bit all over. It depends where I am in the world, right? So I live most of my time in beautiful Miami, Florida. But obviously, I'm not from Miami. I don't sound like I'm from Miami. So I'm from beautiful Perth, Western Australia. So I live between the two places. So when I'm in Miami, I see clients in person here in Miami. So I generally wake up pretty late. I generally go to dance class because that's really important to me, walk my dog, and then I'll see some clients in the afternoon, do some home visits. So that looks like going to kids' homes or schools and helping them out with whatever potty training challenges that they have. Then I will come back home and I work with my Australian clients in the evening because of the time difference. So they're 12 hours into the future. Australia lives in the future. And I speak to those clients until about midnight and then I go to bed. But when I'm in Australia, it's sort of the opposite. So I wake up early because everyone wakes up early in Australia. And I see my clients during the day. And then I will see some of my clients via video chat that are in the US or other parts of the world, either early morning or evening, depending on what's going on.
That is fantastic. That sounds crazy. There's, here in the US, we have a whole thing like bi-coastal, but that's like bi-planetary,
Still bi-coastal, still two coasts. I'm still East Coast and West Coast, but just East Coast of the US and West Coast of Australia.
That is crazy. It must be exhausting. When do you sleep?
I I've gotten pretty good at sleeping just whenever I need to. So at any given point, I can lay down, have a good nap. But my sleep schedule sort of tends late when I'm in the US, but tends early when I'm in Australia. So it kind of works out. I don't have to change my schedule the full 12 hours. I just kind of have to nudge it here and there a little bit. And I find that helps with all of the travel.
Awesome. So, what is the most common situation parents need help with?
Constipation. 100% that is the biggest issue that I see and the most common reason for referrals to my service. It's about a 1 in 3 children will become constipated at some point in their life. Most people think of constipation as maybe not being able to poo for a little while or a long while, maybe having hard, painful poos. But we know that constipation is a really tricky little animal and it can look like lots of different things. So there's actually some children will become so constipated, their bowel will become so blocked with old poo that liquid poo will start to leak out of their anus. And of course, this is really disturbing for families because they might think, oh, their child has diarrhea, their child's really sick, they've got a food allergy, and they're not, they get kicked out of school, they're not allowed to go to school because they're sick, they're not allowed to do their activities. And it can be really frustrating because the child might not even be able to feel this happening. But what's going on is something called fecal impaction. And that's sort of what happens when constipation gets really serious. So often, a lot of my job is helping children and families understand what the cause is of their bowel incontinence or their bowel issue, which is often constipation, although it can be other things. We do a really thorough assessment, and then we will not only treat the constipation, work with their medical professionals to do that, but also think about lifestyle factors, diet, movement, positioning, and routines throughout the day to try and prevent this from happening again.
So is the constipation, is that caused because the child is um has anxiety around pooping their pants and that they're holding it in until that it just kind of hardens and stays?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, so some children will feel really anxious about doing a poo, and maybe it's when they've started potty training or learning about the potty that then they start to hold on to their poos. They don't feel comfortable doing a poo in the potty or the toilet. So then that will lead to constipation. If you hold on to your poos for long enough, they'll get harder and not want to come out. But even if that child is doing everything right and the family's doing everything right, it's a really high number of kids that get constipated. So even if they're eating well, drinking well, sleeping well, moving well, constipation can still happen. It's a really tricky thing. So I always encourage families to really be on the lookout for their child's bowel habits, really get to know your child's bowel habits, because if you catch this early, we can make really simple tweaks to help this child along. But of course, if it gets left for a long period of time and it's not treated appropriately, then it can become really painful and really scary for kids as well.
Yeah, and I think the harder that it is, the more painful it is to come out, which becomes that feedback loop, right? Of the I want
Absolutely.
to do it because the last time it really hurt, so now I don't want to do it again.
A
Um,
hundred percent.
so do you
Yeah.
also work with children with additional needs?
I work mostly with children with additional needs, but not always. Children who have a specific diagnosis might be more prone to conditions such as constipation or even something called overactive bladder because of differences in their muscle tone and neurology. They might also have more serious conditions such as neurogenic bowel and bladder, where the nerve innervations to our bowel and bladder aren't letting us wee and poo effectively and consistently. So I see a lot of children with these more complex issues, but then I also see a lot of kids that have maybe just, they're typically developing and they have either just developed a bit of a fear around the toilet, like you said, some anxiety around there, or potentially just families who it's their first child, they've never done this before, they just want a little bit more advice and support. And often they'll just need a couple of chats over the phone to set up a bit of a routine and encourage them to get into it.
Fantastic. What are some of the common misconceptions that people have about children's incontinence development or
Oh,
continence?
that's a good question. I think I think that one of the biggest misconceptions is that we really have to wait until children are demonstrating lots of signs of readiness before we can potty train them or before we can start that potty learning journey. So I like to think of continence and potty learning and developing the ability to wee and poo in the toilet as a bit of a continuum, similar to the way that we think about things like sleeping and feeding. So when you first get your brand new fresh baby home from wherever you've birthed that baby, then often the first things we start thinking about are sleep and feeding. We would never get a 6 month old and suddenly expect them to all of a sudden in 3 days eat steak. And so we don't want to do that with potty training either. If we start the process of potty learning really early on in a child's life, then we can ease them into it. So it's not such a big event. Some children I've met are such little whizzes. They are able to potty train really, really quickly. And maybe, even within a couple of days, or even I've seen one day before. But not all children, and indeed, probably not the majority of children, will be able to do it in such a short amount of time. So I think a lot of parents put a lot of pressure on themselves to think, I've got to potty train my kid in 3 days because that's what it says on the internet. That's what the book says. But really, if we think about this as a development in terms of sleeping or eating, we're going to work towards this over a long period of time so that eventually we have a little person that's sleeping well, eating well, but also pooing and weeing well.
So what are the signs that you look for to know that a child is ready to start potty learning?
So there's only a couple of signs that I look for. So the first one is the most important, and that is a bowel and bladder that empty at appropriate intervals for that child. So what does that even mean? That means that the child is pooing no more than 3 times a day, but no less than every second day. And that they're able to hold their wees for an appropriate amount of time for their bladder size. So for a younger child, say if they're 1 or 2, looking at maybe around an hour or two. If they are 3 or 4, we're looking at 2 to 3 hours. If the child's not able to hold onto their wees for that long, or if they're doing poos more or too frequently or less frequently, then that might be an indication that something underlying is not quite right. And if we don't address that, then we're probably going to find that we're up against a bit of a losing battle when we're getting them onto the potty. So we always want to do a really thorough assessment, see what's going on with their bowel and bladder. So that's the first sign. The second sign is good head control or able to sit somewhat unsupported. So you might be thinking, wow, that's pretty young, because I know lots of really little tiny tackers, maybe 6 months or, even younger, that can hold their head up and can sit pretty well, even if they need a little bit of support. Well, that's amazing. That's the right time to start. Imagine if every time you did a nappy change, you sat your tiny little baby with good head control over the potty and just told them that this is where wees and poos go. Imagine how many repetitions of this they would get by the time they're 2 or 3. All of a sudden, that kid's not going to be scared of pottying, and one day it's probably just going to click for them. And that journey is going to be a lot easier than getting to, 3 weeks before school starts and thinking, oh my goodness, we have to potty train this kid, otherwise they don't go to school.
So you're not looking for things like ability to communicate or a dry diaper overnight that they're able to go through the night without, holding it overnight. Those are not signs for readiness.
Not necessarily. They can be really good signs. If we are seeing those things, then we might think, yeah, absolutely, this kid's ready. But I never wait for these things. Some of the children that I work with maybe don't have a very robust communication system yet. They might not use verbal communication as their main way of getting their point across. They might use gestures or signs or a communication device. And so if I wait for them to tell me that they need to go to the toilet, I might be waiting a really long time. And I don't want that child to miss the opportunity to become continent and all the wonderful things that go along with that, being able to do swimming lessons and lots of fun activities with their friends and all of the social benefit that has. just because they're not able to communicate like the rest of kids, or even things like pulling their pants up and down. If we think about if we get a really tiny tacker, they're maybe 2 years old and they haven't quite got their pants up and down, we probably wouldn't say to them, "Oh no, they're not ready. We better not put them on the potty." What would we do? We'd help them. We'd tuck their little thumbs into their pants and help them pull their pants up and down and help them develop that skill as they're learning to wee and poo in the potty or in the toilet. So all of these skills that we develop as part of our toileting routine, the ability to tell when our bowel and bladder are full, the ability to pull our pants up and down, the ability to even get on and off the toilet, these aren't prerequisites. These are things that we can learn along the journey.
And do you recommend, like, I've seen two different things. I've seen like the little potty chairs that are child size that sit on the floor. And then I've also seen the retrofit. So people do little stairs and they'll actually have them go into the adult toilet, but it's smaller so they don't fall inside. Is one
Yeah.
better than the other?
I like both. I'm a both and kind of person in life. If there's an opportunity to have both, I think you probably should. As you can tell by living in two different places, I think that it's great to offer children choices, and children will choose what they want to use. And families are really the experts on their kids as well. Most of the time, I default to the mom and I say, "These are the options. Which do you think your child would like? Or let's try them both out and see which one your child likes best." There's advantages and disadvantages to each. When you're working with really little kids, so I do some baby potting, or it's called elimination communication for very little children, or babies. And using a small potty can be really good because they're low to the ground. They're going to feel more safe and secure. And it gives them a little bit more of that independence, especially as they get older and a bit more mobile on their own. You can get really great potties that sit on the ground that look like a toilet and even have like a little flush sound that goes on, which is really fun. But using the toilet is what we're eventually all going to have to do anyway. So getting kids onto the toilet and feeling comfortable with the toilet is a really important step. So often I encourage families, even if they're using a potty, to do some toilet sits as well, where they're on the big toilet, but they have the most supportive equipment to ensure that their bottom is really well supported. They're not having to brace with their arms to hold themselves upright. They're able to, relax their core. They're able to sit there comfortably. And we want something nice and sturdy under their feet. So we want a nice sturdy step so their feet can be placed on that and their knees are higher than their hips. We want them in that beautiful squatting position because that's how our bodies were made to poop. We were made to poop in a squat. So if we can get the equipment onto the toilet, even if families prefer to use a potty, I would still encourage them to do one toilet sit a day. And even if you just sit there and read a book or sit there and have a chat or sit there and listen to your favorite song, there's no expectation you do anything just yet. But getting that child used to the idea that every now and again, I've got to stop what I'm doing, come to this weird room and sit on this odd chair.
So do you recommend if you have the little child-sized one, does it live in the bathroom so the child associates you go to the bathroom, or is it in the play space or somewhere where it's going to be accessible to them?
That's another really good question. These are all the questions that I get from families as well. So you obviously understand this really well. I would say that, again, I often default to a family. If we can get the potty into the bathroom, or a toilet space, that can be really useful for that contextual relevance. Like I don't go to the playroom or go to my kitchen to do poos. So we want to make it like a bit more real life. However, if you are outside playing or you're in the playroom that's downstairs and your toilet is upstairs and you are working with your child, maybe you're doing no nappy time with your child, they're in undies or just, with nothing on, and that's really good for their learning as well. And we know that we need something close by so that they can quickly get onto the potty. I'm not opposed to bringing the potty with you. The potty is portable, and I think that's one of the best things about it. Often families will have a potty in their car. They might have one at grandma's house. They might have one, they might have one in a couple of different rooms. And this isn't a bad strategy. It's a great strategy for getting success in the potty. But then we do have to think about, okay, how can we move that potty slowly closer and closer to the bathroom? Maybe we start by putting it if we're outside playing, maybe we start by putting it near the door. So the child has to kind of run to the door to get there. Then we might place it just inside the door. We might slowly creep it towards the bathroom so that the child is still successful, but understanding that eventually we're going to have to make it all the way back into that bathroom.
So another question I have is, do you recommend like setting up kind of a potty schedule, like every 2 hours or every 3 hours? Or are we waiting for the child to get the feedback from their body that they need to do something and then have them go?
Another great question. So the feedback from their body, that's a skill called interoception. And I actually watched you speak to a wonderful clinician who was talking all about interoception. So that's a really nice tie-in. So our body gives us clues when we need to wee and poo and eat and drink and all of those sort of things. And being able to recognize those cues and then act on them is our sense of interoception, which is really, really important for potty training, of course. However, the way that we develop our interoceptive awareness for our bowel and bladder is that we do a bit of a schedule. So if we can get kids emptying their bowel and bladder at regular intervals across the day, then we have this beautiful filling and emptying cycle of the bowel and bladder. And that means that it's a little bit more regular, it's a little bit more predictable, but also they're going to get those sensations. So when our rectum stretches when we have poo in it, and when our bladder stretches when it has wee in it, that's the thing that sends the message to the brain saying, okay, we need to go. So kids don't necessarily have all of those signs and signals intact, or they're not able to recognize those signals at first. So if we start with a schedule, then we can sort of tweak it and see, okay, well, they're always weeing it around 10 or around morning tea time, but they're never doing a wee around afternoon tea time. Might give us a clue as to if they're having enough fluid at those times, but it could also then tell us when we need to focus our potty sits. And then we can start to talk to children about what it feels like before you go to the potty, what it feels like after you go to the potty, and what it feels like whilst you're doing a wee or a poo. And that helps to develop that sense of interoceptive awareness. Then we can use that wait and catch method. So we wait until that child has, poo face or wee face. Everyone knows, all parents will know what I mean. And then we can think, okay, let's quickly get you to the toilet. But I do advocate for starting with a schedule. And we don't necessarily need to set an alarm or make it really regimented. But think about times during your day where you would naturally go to the toilet. So most people go to the toilet first thing in the morning when they wake up, last thing at night, and then roughly after the times that we eat. Most children, most school-age children will need to wee between 4 and 7 times per day, and will poo, up to 3 times per day. So we don't need to sit them on the toilet any more often than 7 times per day. So if you get morning, evening, and then your meal times, including snacks, so breakfast, morning tea, lunch, afternoon tea, and dinner, that's 7 times. That's more than enough. And if we encourage children to sit after they've eaten food, that also helps them to respond to the gastrocolic reflex. So when we eat food, our stomach stretches, again, these beautiful stretch receptors that tell us so much about our body. And that actually increases our peristaltic action, which is that squeezing movement all through our digestive tract. That means that we actually start pushing poos out after we've eaten, to make room for the new food. So after we eat is a really good time to practice sitting on the toilet and getting kids used to that idea so that we can get those poos out. They're not holding on to them all day, and they can have a really healthy bowel and bladder.
Amazing. So not all kids, well, some children may be very anxious about using the toilet. So what do you recommend for parents, how they can support their child?
The first thing is start from a place of co-regulation. With all children, parents are the best tool. You yourself, your body and your brain is the best tool you have to be able to help your child regulate. Also, take a big deep breath and really think about how you're feeling about toileting. Children feed off our energy. They can tell how we're feeling almost before we can. And if a parent themselves are feeling anxious about the toileting, maybe there's not long to school and there's pressure to toilet train, maybe there's some social pressure, all your friends' kids have toilet trained. There could be lots of things going on for you. Or maybe it's just been a really tough time. Your kid's not enjoying it, you're not enjoying it. So really think about how you're feeling to start with and try and figure out how you can regulate your own emotions and your own feelings around it. So if you need to take a little break, that's totally okay. If you need to call in some help, that's absolutely okay. If you need to, do whatever you need to do, your deep breathing, your yoga, go for a walk, whatever it is, just back off from that activity a little bit, regulate yourself, and then come back to that activity from a place of co-regulation. Focus on the process rather than the outcome. So if we can get kids sitting on the toilet or the potty, even if the lid's down, clothes are on, the whole kit and caboodle, that's okay. They're still getting used to being in that environment. Think of how we can make the toilet a fun, inviting place. Often bathrooms are echoey and bright and loud and smell weird. So if we can think about the sensory aspects, can we make it warmer in there? Or is it too hot? Can we make it cooler? Can we give them a snuggly blanket to wrap themselves in? Can we bring in some of their favorite toys? Can we bring in some of their favorite books? Can we get them doing some deep breathing activities when they sit on the toilet? Because, of course, that's a great way for children to relax their bodies and a great way for parents and children to co-regulate together. I often really love to use like little tools like pinwheels to get breathing and blowing activities going, or even party blowers. No, you can have a toilet party, make it really fun, and see how your child reacts to that. So even just getting them sitting on the toilet, if there's no expectation of wheeze and poos coming out, can be a really nice step. Now, some families, their child won't even go into the bathroom. So this might be where a potty comes in handy, doing some play around the potty, can the child train Teddy to use the potty? Can the child help their little brother or sister? Getting siblings involved can be a really fun way. Also model to your child if you feel comfortable. And I would say most parents do because they don't go to the toilet alone anyway. Get your kid in there with you, and so that they can see that you're doing wheeze and poos in the toilet and you're coping with it just fine. That's going to really help to regulate kids and demystify it a little bit. Another thing I love to do is teach children about their digestive system. If they can learn about their bodies and what's going on, and also teach them about how a toilet works. If they can understand about all these things, sometimes it makes it a little bit less scary and it piques their interest to want to have a bit of a go themselves.
Yeah, one of the things that I've noticed here in the in the US, and I'm sure you've seen them, is that when you're out in public and you go to the public toilets, and now they have these motion sensor toilets that are
Yes.
terrifying. They're so loud. They go off 5 times when you're sitting on the toilet, and I can't imagine
Yes.
a child who's just learning or a child that's with sensory sensitivities. Like that must
Mhm.
like reset like all the hard work that you've ever done to get them to use the toilet, and now this
Yeah.
violent flushing sound is happening every time they go near the toilet. That do you
Yes.
have any tips about dealing with those types of toilets and managing their anxiety around them?
Absolutely. So the first one is toilet tourism. So from a young age, you should really try and take your child into lots of different public toilet environments. Now, not saying you have to sit them on the toilet because the equipment's not there, not saying that you have to, take them into a stall or anything, but just get them used to that environment. Maybe you just go in there and wash your hands and you leave so that they start to acclimate to those environments because eventually they're going to have to use them. So the first thing is just getting used to the environment. Second thing is cover the sensor. So even just bringing a pack of, I don't have one on my desk at the moment, but just bringing a pack of Post-its with you. And if you cover up the sensor, then that often stops that automatic flushing. I know what it's like. I've sat on the toilet and I think it's more so in the US. We have a few in Australia, but not as many as I've seen. But it gave me such a fright the first time it happened as well. I thought, who did that? Who's in here with me? So I can understand that it would be really, really scary for kids. So cover up the sensor, use a little Post-it or a sticker, have a little thing, like a little pack in your bag. And then the next one is sort of try and scope out. It's not always possible, but try and scope out toilets where they have like a really good family room. Often you'll have a big toilet and a little toilet together, so parent and child can both sit. It's a room in itself. It's self-contained. It's quieter. They might not have the automatic flushing on those toilets, especially little ones. They don't often have automatic flushing on little toilets, so that can be a really nice way of just being a bit prepared. So figure out, look it up. figure out where you're going to go. And that can also help your child to feel more comfortable with general public toilet spaces. The hand dryer is another one that often gets kids because it comes on automatically. You can't control it. Again, getting kids used to a hand dryer. So even playing a game at home where you get your hair dryer and you're like, go into the bathroom. We're like, okay, we're going to dry our hands now, and use the hair dryer to dry your hands so that they're a little bit more used to the sound and the feeling of it. But then I also work with one wonderful mum who is so clever. She just printed out a not in order or does not work or something. So yeah, I think out of order. That's the word I'm looking for. Out of order sign. She laminated it and she brings it around in her handbag, and she always just sticks it up on the hand dryer. And then of course people see it and they're like, oh, it's not working. I better not use it. And they don't use it. So I thought that was actually really clever idea.
It is so, so loud because the bathrooms are small and not designed for sound buffering or whatever. And every time they go,
Absolutely. They're so echoey.
hair raising so loud. I'm like,
Yeah.
nobody wants to use these. Are terrifying. So
Yeah, using headphones or ear defenders, or like playing a specific song or audiobook or something that your child really likes is a good idea too. Often kids, if they have sensory sensitivities around touch, they won't want headphones necessarily on their head. So that might be a bit of a long game to help them find headphones that are comfortable for them, but they can be really useful as well, especially noise cancelling headphones.
So speaking of headphones, what tools and equipment do you recommend for families starting the potty training journey?
Yeah, so we've already spoken about some of them. So getting yourself a really good quality toilet seat. The first step of any potty training journey is getting really supportive equipment. So finding a good seat and a good step. Now, you might have a child who can climb, a tree, no problem. And you think, oh, my kid doesn't need this to get on and off the toilet. But if we remember, we're not actually trying to help them get on and off the toilet. Well, we are, but that's not the main reason we're setting up this equipment. The main reason is to give their bottom a really nice stable base so that they're able to relax their pelvic floor muscles. Our pelvic floor are the base of our core muscles, this beautiful web of muscles that kind of holds all our insides up, the base of our pelvis. And it forms a group of core muscles with other muscles. So our abdominals, our back muscles, even our glutes are involved. And if we are focusing our energy on keeping ourselves upright because we don't want to fall in that big hole, then we're not focusing on relaxing. That pelvic floor is probably going to be switched on. And even if that child can get their wheeze and poos out, they might not be emptying their bowel and bladder really effectively. So that's really what we want. We want their bowel and bladder to be emptied completely when they sit on the toilet. So that's that beautiful seat. I really like the family style toilet seats where you remove your toilet seat and you replace it with a family toilet seat, which has a adult seat and then a child seat that's like a lid, and then another lid that goes on top. So that means that everybody can use the toilet. It's a really natural skill progression. When I go to the toilet, I don't put an insert on. I just lift up the lid or put the lid down. And also for schools, for grandma's house, for all of those environments where kids are, it's a really great thing because often I always see those inserts and they're so dusty down on the floor and I think, oh, I wouldn't want to put my bottom on that. So if it's a toilet seat, it's going to be cleaned really effectively. So the toilet seat's really important. The step is really important. Like I said, really firm, stable, nice wide base of support. So at least hip width. And then we want it to be high enough so your child has their feet flat and their knees above their hips in a bit of a squatting position. And kids generally have a good deep squat. They've been practicing that and haven't jammed all up yet. So getting them into that squat is really good. The next thing would be around helping kids feel really comfortable in that bathroom environment. Often it's sort of the most boring room of the house. So having a little basket of books, toys, fidget, sensory things, anything that's going to appeal to your child. And you can rotate these things through. So I usually, on my visits, bring a little bag with me, a little Lucky Dip bag. I don't think Lucky Dip's a concept in the US, but I'm making it one. So It's basically a bag that has lots of different little like prizes in it. And the aim is not necessarily to reward the child. The aim is to give the child something to do whilst they're sitting on the potty or the toilet. So rewarding that process or thinking about making the process really fun so that you don't have to reward the outcome. If the kid's looking forward to sitting on the toilet because they're like, oh, I get to play with these cool toys, then you're not going to have to reward them after they sit on the toilet because they're going to want to go. So getting that set up is a really good idea. Thinking about the sensory considerations in your bathroom. Do you need to put bath mats down to make it less echoey? Do you need to kind of change the fan or put a separate light in there so the fan doesn't go off when you're in there, when you put the light on? Sometimes those things are together. So there's lots of different ways to think about giving your child that really nice sensory experience in the bathroom. And then thinking about underwear too. Once we ditch that diaper, what are we going to be wearing? We're going to be wearing undies. So a really fun thing can be taking your kid to the shop or getting your kid on internet shopping, which might be even better. And getting them to pick out some really cool underwear that maybe have their favorite cartoon character, their favorite colors, something that they can feel excited about so that they're looking forward to getting out of the diaper rather than holding onto that diaper for dear life.
So that brings up two questions for me. One is, um, it sounds like you don't necessarily encourage giving a reward when they successfully go to the bathroom, like a toy or candy. That's something that you don't recommend.
Not necessarily. Of course, every child is different, and there are some kids where you can say, if you get a poo in that potty, I'm going to give you an M&M. And that child will go to the potty, give you a poo in there, and they get the M&M, and everyone's happy. Most of the children I work with, this is not necessarily going to be an effective strategy. Maybe there's not a reward motivating enough that the child really wants to work for. And also, for children that are really anxious around the toilet, they're probably not going to be super happy if we're trying to bribe them into something. Kids are so smart. And if you're trying to bribe them, they know, okay, there's something you want me to do that you don't think I'll like. And that's why you're trying to give me this lolly or chocolate or prize afterwards. If we can just make the activity fun and stress-free, then kids will want to do it. It's a little bit like, tidying up or after you're doing playing. If you say, okay, it's time to tidy up and then you get a chocolate, maybe the kid might engage in it. But if you make tidying up a game, like you're playing basketball, throwing all the toys in and you do it with them, most likely they're going to come along for the ride and they're not going to want anything afterwards. You also don't get in that reward trap where, you've got your child that's, 2 years later and they're still expecting a Smart or an M&M to poo in the toilet. So you don't kind of get into that trap. For some children, rewards work really well. And parents will know. Parents always come to me and they say rewards are really effective or rewards are not at all effective. And I'll always follow the parent's lead.
And the other thing too is when you were saying your lucky dip bag, are these toys that are only accessible when they're going to the bathroom, or can they be like a favorite toy that they like playing with from out in the playroom?
Yeah, either. Again, it's a little bit of both and it's a little bit choose your own adventure. So for some kids, having special toilet toys will be something really motivating to get into that toilet. For other kids, they might not be able to understand that why this toy just has to stay in the toilet. They might get upset if they're not allowed to then bring it into the living room. So again, I defer to parents. They know their children best. What do they think is going to be helpful? I often like sort of rotate through the toys because especially little things like this, I love like little pinwheels and party blowers, even having like some balloons, blowing activities, because again, that's really helpful for our pelvic floor coordinated movement, which helps us to wee and poo. And also they're a little bit disposable. Like at some point, let's face it, this little guy is going to go for a swim in the toilet as much as we try and prevent it. And yes, you do have to fish it out, which isn't always that pleasant, but then we can just throw it away. It's not $50 worth of Lego, that we're having to then scrub in the bathroom. So having like a few little things, and often if you put toys into a bag that a child can't see in, it doesn't have to be exciting stuff. Like in my lucky dip bag, I literally have this stuff like balloons and party blowers and pinwheels and even ice packs, things like that are just kind of fun to have a look at, fun to unpack, but maybe in themselves don't hold that much value. But then some children will want a really special toy to bring in with them, and then I encourage them to do that, or a favorite book, or listen to a favorite audiobook or a favorite song.
Yeah, amazing. So I think we're going to wrap up, and I'm wondering how you think that healthcare professionals can collaborate better to support children with continence challenges.
Amazing. So I really encourage healthcare professionals to get together, first of all. We know from all of the research that's been done in this area that a team approach is really the best. So I always try and touch base with children's, their family physician or their pediatrician if I think that they need, assistance with constipation management. But then even looking at the team around that child, maybe they don't have any other therapists involved, but we might be talking to grandma, and we might be talking to their teacher or their, daycare worker. If the child does have a therapy team, then it can be really useful. Like chat to their OT about their sensory needs, chat to their physio about, when they squat, do they look stable? Chat to their speech pathologist about, I've noticed this kid doesn't blow very well. If there's something oral motor that's going on that we can help get them, a better lip seal so they can blow more effectively, so their pelvic floor is working better. So getting all these professionals together can be really good. And I always encourage, even if your area isn't continence management or toileting, I always encourage people to ask questions about general health, which most professionals do. So ask about their eating, their drinking, and have they experienced anything like constipation before? And that can be really telling, because if they have, then that might be even some of the reason that your goals aren't being progressed. If you're working on a child on their developing their diet and expanding their food preferences, if they're constipated up to the eyeballs, you know what? They're not going to want to eat any new foods. So addressing these issues can sometimes see a huge change in the child's overall well-being and their progression towards other therapeutic goals.
Amazing. So tell people how they can get a hold of you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love people to get in touch. I'm always happy to chat about anything poos and wees. So you can go to my website, which is tabithapoole.com, and you can book. There's a booking link there where you can book a time to have a chat with me, and I'll chat about your child specifically. Or if you have a client, you can get permission from the family and we can have a chat about that. You can also reach out to me on Instagram. My Instagram is Toilet Time with Tabby, and I would love to get in touch with you guys.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your words of wisdom. I am sure that I learned a lot, and I have a 15-year-old. And
Amazing.
things I should have known back when I was toilet training him. And it brought back a whole lot of memories, I can tell you that. Thank you for your time, and you've been so informative. And
Thank you.